Welcome back to Study Hall, everyone.
Yeah.
It's great to have you all with us, as always.
Uh-huh.
So today we're diving into a pretty big topic, love.
Right.
But we're going to be looking at it through the lens of a thinker who, wasn't exactly known for being all warm and fuzzy.
Yes.
Søren Kierkegaard.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a challenging one.
Definitely.
But so insightful when it comes to these big questions like,
Like love.
Love, exactly.
And the book we're looking at is his Works of Love.
Great book.
Published back in 1847.
Wow. So we're going old school today.
We are,
Oh,
and for
yeah.
this deep dive, we're using the 1949 edition from Princeton University Press.
Oh, yeah. The one with the intro by Douglas V. Steere.
That's the one.
Yeah. His insights are really helpful for understanding where Kierkegaard is coming from.
Totally.
Especially given the whole context of what was going on with Christianity at the time.
Right, Kierkegaard wasn't just, writing about love in a vacuum.
Exactly. He was
Yeah.
really concerned about how Christianity was being lived out. Or, maybe not lived out.
Right, and he saw this real disconnect between what people were saying about love and how they were actually treating each other.
Yeah, a lot of hypocrisy, he felt.
Oh, absolutely.
And he was calling people out on it,
Big time.
saying, hey, you want to talk the talk.
Yeah.
You got to walk the walk, too,
Exactly.
when it comes to loving your neighbor.
That's the heart of it, right?
Totally.
So Works of Love is a collection of discourses.
Like sermons, almost.
Yeah, and each one explores a different aspect of what Christian love really means.
And they're not always easy to swallow.
Definitely not.
He really challenges a lot of the assumptions we have about love.
He does.
Like right off the bat, he throws us this idea of the hidden life of love.
Yeah, in the very first section.
The hidden life of love and its recognition by its fruits.
Such a Kierkegaardian title, right?
Oh, totally.
But what's he getting at there?
Well, he's saying that genuine Christian love often operates beneath the surface.
So it's not about, like, the grand gestures.
No, not necessarily.
Or, posting about it on social media.
Huh. Definitely not.
Right, it's not about appearances.
Exactly. It's about something deeper.
So how do we know then?
How do we know if it's real?
Yeah, if someone actually loves in this true Christian way.
Well, Kierkegaard gives us this analogy.
Okay, I love a good analogy.
He says it's like a tree.
You can tell what kind of tree it is by its fruit.
Exactly. You don't judge a tree by its bark.
Right.
You look at the fruit it bears.
Okay, so we should be looking at the actions.
The fruits of love, he calls them.
And those might not always be what we expect.
Right. Like sometimes the most loving thing you can do isn't the most flashy or popular thing.
That's interesting.
It's about what's truly best for the other person.
Even if it's hard.
Even if it's hard, exactly.
So then what about all those times when we think we're being loving,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe we're actually just serving our own needs?
Oh, yeah. He's got a lot to say about that.
Like when we do something nice for someone, but really we just want them to like us more.
Right. Or when we give to charity.
But it's more about making ourselves feel good.
Than actually helping others.
Right. He calls this self-love.
And he's not saying all self-love is bad.
Right. We need to care for ourselves too.
Of course. But he's saying that this focus on ourselves can distort our understanding of what it really means to love our neighbor.
It's like we're looking through a warped lens.
Exactly.
And we end up seeing love as something that revolves around us.
Instead of something that flows outward towards others.
Yeah, that's a tough one to admit.
It is.
But he's right.
He often is.
So he's basically saying that if you're only willing to love those who are like you,
Or who benefit you in some way.
then you're not truly loving at all.
Tough, but true.
And this was pretty radical stuff back in Kierkegaard's time.
Oh, absolutely. He was going against the grain.
Big time. He was challenging the whole social order.
Which was based on all sorts of hierarchies and divisions.
Right, like class distinctions,
Religious differences.
gender roles.
All of it.
And Kierkegaard saying, nope,
Love transcends all that.
everyone is equal in the eyes of God.
And therefore, deserving of our love.
So how does that land for us today?
Well, it's still a challenge.
For sure.
I mean, think about all the ways we still struggle with prejudice and inequality. Are we really loving our neighbors if we're turning a blind eye to injustice?
Or failing to advocate for those who are marginalized.
These are questions we all need to wrestle with.
On a personal level.
And on a societal level.
Yeah, because our own biases and assumptions
They can really get in the way.
of fully embracing that radical equality.
Which is at the heart of Christian love.
According to Kierkegaard, at least.
Yeah, he was pretty adamant about that.
He was.
So it's worth considering.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've been talking about how Kierkegaard sees love.
As something much deeper than just, warm, fizzy feelings.
Right. It's demanding.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's about action.
About commitment.
About really seeing the other person.
Exactly.
But then where does that leave us when it comes to like...
our actual relationship.
Yeah, the day-to-day stuff.
Well, this is where he brings in this idea of...
Okay, hit me with it.
the eternal in love.
The eternal in love.
Yeah, so he's making a distinction here.
Okay, between
earthly love...
which is...
the kind of love that's subject to change.
Right, it comes and goes.
Depending on circumstances.
People change their minds.
Feelings fade.
Okay, and then the other kind of love.
The eternal kind.
This is the love that's grounded in...
something bigger than ourselves.
in the eternal.
Exactly. And so because of that, it's immutable.
It doesn't change.
Nope. It's steadfast.
It's unwavering.
He uses this really striking analogy to illustrate this point.
Lay it on me.
He says, "Thou shalt love,"
Okay, familiar?
is as certain as testing silver.
Testing silver.
Yeah, like they used to test the purity of silver
Right.
by putting it through fire.
To see if it would hold up.
Exactly, and no matter what you did to it,
The pure silver would always remain.
the same.
So he's saying
The true love.
it can withstand anything.
Yeah, it's not some fleeting feeling.
Or a passing fancy.
It's a commitment,
A choice
an act of the will,
that goes beyond
all the ups and downs,
of human emotions.
which, let's face it, are pretty fickle.
They are.
But true love,
It runs deeper.
much deeper.
I mean, this seems to kind of go against how we usually think about love.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to romanticize it, right?
Like all-consuming passion.
Fireworks,
Butterflies.
butterflies.
Is he saying those things are bad?
I don't think so.
No, not necessarily.
But he is pushing us to consider
Whether our understanding of love
is rooted in something more solid.
than just fleeting emotions.
What happens when the butterflies fly away?
Right. What happens when things get tough?
When the honeymoon phase is over?
Exactly. Can your love weather the storm?
So then how does this idea of eternal love...
Play out in our actual interactions with people?
Yeah, how do we live this out?
Well, Kierkegaard argues that it leads to
Okay.
a radical equality among all people.
Radical equality. Yeah. He has this famous line where he says,
Give it to me.
"This is the very point. Love is the neighbor."
Love is the neighbor.
Meaning that love obliterates all those social hierarchies,
The prejudices.
the distinctions we make between people.
Like who's in and who's out.
Exactly. All that goes out the window.
When it comes to Christian love,
Because everyone
regardless
background
beliefs
becomes equal
in the eyes of God,
and therefore...
deserving of our love.
Okay, this is a lot to take in.
It is.
It's like a complete overhaul
Of how we view the world.
and how we interact with the people in it.
And remember, this was radical stuff back then.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Kierkegaard was writing at a time.
Of intense social divisions,
Huge class disparity.
religious persecution.
Gender inequality.
It was a completely different world.
But he was directly challenging those norms.
He was saying,
You can't claim to love your neighbor.
while also upholding systems that oppress them.
That's hypocrisy.
Pure and simple. So it's a challenge that's still relevant today.
Absolutely.
I mean, we still have so far to go.
When it comes to social justice,
And true equality.
so how do we even begin to put this into practice?
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming.
Where do we start?
Well, I think Kierkegaard would say
I'm listening.
it starts with examining our own hearts.
Like taking a good hard look.
At our own biases,
Our assumptions.
our prejudices,
Do we really see everyone as equal?
especially those who are different from us.
Different in terms of beliefs, lifestyle,
Anything that might make us feel
uncomfortable,
or superior.
because that's the test, right?
That's the real challenge.
To love those.
Who we might not naturally gravitate towards.
Those who challenge our comfort zones.
Those who make us question our assumptions.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
When it comes to Kierkegaardian love.
So we've talked about the hidden nature of love,
Mm-hmm.
the eternal element that makes it unchanging.
And the radical equality it demands.
But then how does all of this translate into,
Loving the actual people we encounter in our lives.
like not some abstract idea of love,
But love in the flesh,
love for the people.
right in front of us.
Well, this is where Kierkegaard gets into.
Our duty to love the men we see.
He has a whole chapter on that.
And he's very clear that Christian love,
Isn't about loving some distant ideal.
or some perfect version of a person,
It's about loving the concrete individuals.
with all their warts and all,
Their flaws and complexities.
the good, the bad, and the ugly,
And he uses this really interesting example.
from the Bible.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The relationship between Christ And Peter,
Peter the disciple,
the one who denied knowing Christ
3 times.
when things got tough.
Yeah, not exactly a shining moment.
But a very human one.
Right. We all make mistakes.
We all fall short.
And Kierkegaard uses this story
To illustrate the messiness of love.
how it's not always pretty
Or easy.
or convenient,
But it's still love.
even when it's hard,
Even when we're disappointed.
even when we're betrayed.
Because that's the reality of loving human beings.
They're imperfect.
And so are we.
And so he's reminding us that true love,
Isn't about finding perfect people to love.
it's about choosing to love
The people right in front of us,
as they are.
not as we wish they were.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is.
It's like he's giving us permission
to let go of our expectations.
to embrace the messiness
of real relationships.
and to find beauty
In the imperfections.
of the people we love.
Because that's where the real love is.
Not in some idealized fantasy
But in the nitty-gritty.
of everyday life.
With all its challenges and joys.
And this leads us to another really interesting concept.
Maybe even controversial.
Hit me with it.
Our duty to remain in the debt of love to one another.
Okay, now this one sounds tricky.
It can be.
Like, are we talking about keeping score here?
No, not at all.
So what's he getting at?
Well, he uses this financial analogy
Okay.
to explain how the more we give in love.
The more indebted we become.
Wait.
So it's like the opposite of a regular debt.
Exactly, because with a financial debt,
We want to pay it off.
as quickly as
But
possible,
with the debt of love,
it just keeps growing.
the more we give.
The more we owe.
But it's not about obligation.
No, it's about recognizing that true love
Is infinitely inexhaustible.
as like a wellspring that never runs dry.
The more you draw from it.
The more it overflows.
So it's not about expecting something in return.
We're trying to balance the scale.
It's about cultivating a spirit of
Generosity.
and selflessness that flows naturally from a heart full of love.
Exactly.
So then how do we reconcile this idea
Of remaining eternally indebted.
with the idea that love shouldn't feel like a burden?
That's the key, right?
Because if we're constantly focused on what we owe,
It can start to feel like a chore.
like we're keeping score.
And that's not what Kierkegaard is talking about.
So how do we avoid that trap
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier.
about the hidden life of love,
If we're constantly focused on the outward expressions of love,
on proving our love to others,
on making sure we're getting our due,
then we've missed the point entirely.
because true love,
It transcends all attempts
at calculation,
and control,
it's about surrendering to the mystery
embracing the paradox,
and letting go of our need
to quantify
and measure.
everything,
Because that's where the true transformative power of love resides.
and the letting go,
In the surrender,
in the trust,
that love will always be there.
even when we can't see it
Or measure it.
or control it. It's about trusting that the well will never run dry.
Even when we feel like we've given all we have.
Because in a way, the more we give,
The more we receive.
it's like this beautiful paradox.
Yeah, it defies logic.
But it's at the heart of what Kierkegaard is trying to teach us.
About the nature of true Christian love.
I mean, this is powerful stuff.
It is?
But I gotta be honest,
What's that?
it's a lot to wrap my head around.
I get it.
Like, how do we actually live this out?
Yeah, it can feel pretty overwhelming.
Especially in a world that often seems to value
Selfishness,
competition.
transactional relationships.
So where do we go from here?
How do we take these really complex ideas
And apply them to our own lives,
to our relationships?
to the way we interact with the world around us.
Well, I think Kierkegaard would say
Yeah,
that it starts with that inner transformation,
like we were talking about earlier.
with the hidden life of love,
Right, it's about examining our own hearts.
our motivations.
Are we approaching love from a place of genuine selflessness?
Or are we driven by ego,
Fear,
insecurity?
the need for validation.
It's easy to get caught up in those things.
It is.
But true love,
It requires us to let go of all that
to step outside of ourselves,
and to see the other person,
as they truly are,
not as we want them to be,
or as we need them to be.
to fulfill our own needs.
So it's about asking ourselves,
Some tough questions.
yeah, like,
Am I really seeing the people in my life?
as evil
Especially those who are different from me.
in terms of background,
Beliefs,
lifestyle,
all those things that can make us feel
uncomfortable.
or threatened.
Because that's where the rubber meets the road.
With Kierkegaardian love.
It's about loving the unlovable,
Embracing the difficult,
extending grace,
even when it's hard.
even when we don't feel like it.
Wow.
It's a tall order,
It is.
but I think it's a challenge worth taking on.
Because the rewards
They're immeasurable.
both for ourselves
And for the world around us.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into works of love,
It's important to remember
that we've only just scratched the surface.
of this really profound and challenging work.
Yeah, there's so much more to unpack here,
And some of Kierkegaard's ideas.
especially his critiques of the church.
And the social norms of his day.
They might resonate differently with modern readers.
It's important to approach his work with a critical eye.
To consider the historical context
And to recognize that some of his perspectives.
might not align with contemporary views,
He was a man of his time.
and some of his arguments reflect that.
But even with those caveats.
There's no denying the power
And the relevance.
of his insights into the nature of love,
His writing forces us.
to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves,
And to challenge us.
to live more authentically.
And compassion.
And for those of us who are lifelong learners,
Yeah.
who crave intellectual
And
stimulation,
aren't afraid to wrestle with difficult ideas.
Works of Love offers a lifetime of reflection.
Discovery.
It's not a book to be skimmed.
Or passively consumed.
It's a book to be wrestled with
Debated.
and revisited over time.
As our own understanding of love evolves.
So as we conclude this deep dive into Kierkegaard's Works of Love,
I want to leave you with a question.
okay,
Shoot. What does it really mean?
to love your neighbor as yourself,
It's a question that has echoed through the centuries.
and one that each of us must answer.
For ourselves.
But I think Kierkegaard's work
Provides a powerful framework.
for understanding the depth
And the complexity.
of this seemingly simple command,
He reminds us
that true love,
it's not a feeling,
but a choice,
a commitment.
an act of the will,
It's about seeing beyond the superficial.
and recognizing the inherent dignity
Yeah, and
of every human being,
it's about challenging our own self-deceptions
and embracing the radical equality
that Christian love demands. It's about loving the concrete individuals in front of us,
with all their flaws and complexity.
rather than clinging to idealized versions of love.
And perhaps most importantly,
It's about recognizing that true love
is an inexhaustible wellspring.
that grows larger the more we give.
Thanks for joining us on Study Hall.
For this deep dive into Kierkegaard's Works of Love.
We hope you found it thought-provoking.
And maybe even a little bit challenging.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.
And never stop learning.